Hello, my name is Craig Duff and I am Associate Director for RSM working in the Risk Assurance Directorate. I've been advising and supporting clients as a governance and risk management specialist across all sectors for over 20 years, helping them create more effective working practices, leading to improvements in risk processes and further embedding risk throughout the organisation. That said, I don't consider myself as an expert. What I do have is a lot of experience and knowledge, and it's fair to say that risk management subject is vast. I also promote RSM's own in-house developed web-based software suite, Insight for GRC. That includes the 4 risk module that features during this session. That enables us to deliver intelligent software solutions, utilising our proven and market-leading technologies to help clients have a more effective and efficient way of managing risk. During this session, we will be focusing on the importance of managing risk, but also looking at how to develop an assurance framework, including looking at an example Board Assurance Framework template, sometimes referred to as the BAF. This report brings together in one place all the relevant information on the risks to the board's strategic objectives. It is an essential tool for boards, but like all tools, it needs to be used with skill and diligence. So, just to get us into the risk management mindset, why manage risk? This statement largely says it all. It was said by a non-exec director of an organisation I was working with, so do have a read. The main point here is that the Academy, like any other organisation, is likely to become exposed to the risks they are already controlling, and the risk exposure occurs when the control fails to be effectively applied. This is in fact the mainstay of risk management, ensuring that the control framework manages your principal or strategic risks, as I prefer to call them. These risks that, if not managed, will fundamentally impact on the achievement of one, some, or all of your Academy objectives with material consequences, be it failure, loss, or lost opportunity. It's these strategic risks your board need to understand and manage. Most organisations will normally have between 5 and 12 of these, but they will be present across your organisation and in each of your academies in some form. But this statement clearly describes how a realisation through control failure can lead to the disastrous consequences for your academy, maybe even irrecoverable. This is why risk management should sit firmly on the academy board agenda, and its control element that makes up direction and control the 2 key components of corporate governance. And if we don't, unfortunately, stuff happens. How many times have you read in the press stories around the quality of education, safety, safeguarding, or fraud arising at an academy that seemingly had controls in place to manage risks? In many of these cases, controls were in place to manage the risks, but assurance was not obtained that they were being effectively applied. If something did go wrong or an opportunity is missed, could you hear yourself saying or being asked, why did that happen? How did that happen? I thought X had done that. Or who checked that Y was done, invariably leading to unexpected investigation and rectification costs, as well as embarrassment for individuals or even reputation damage for the Academy, the local governing body and trustees. So in the next few slides, I'd like to cover off how to articulate a risk in a way that really sets the scene in helping develop an effective risk management framework. In this slide, we've broken a risk down into 3 easy steps: risk, cause and effect, which will help you articulate risk better rather than using one big description. For example, here's a risk description constructed in a way that might sound familiar. During the current economic climate, we are concerned that we are unable to provide appropriate training and development opportunities to ensure our staff remain motivated and are happy in their work. If the appraisal and performance management arrangements are not consistent or are removed, we will see increased levels in staff turnover, pressures on current staff, and low standards of teaching and learning, impacting on our long-term goal to retain staff and ensure they are consistently supported with individual development plans. By having these large descriptions on a risk register, it's not always easy to understand what the risk actually is, because there's so many different scenarios going on in one statement. So, if we look at breaking this one large description into risk, cause and effect, we can easily see the risk, so what we are worried about, cause, what could cause the risk to happen, and effect, what would be the effects if the risks did materialise. So to keep things simple to start off with, the example I've used in this slide will make me help you talk through. I'm a zookeeper and my main objective for the zoo is to protect the animals within it. So therefore my risk is my tiger escapes from its cage. The possible causes of this could be the gate's not strong enough or the gate's left open. And the potential effects could be my tiger could maul or kill someone, or I could lose the tiger and lose my asset. You can now clearly see that once large description has now been broken down into 3 component parts with a clear understanding of how this risk is set out. Now, if we revert back to that large risk description that I read out earlier, this may be more of a description that comes closer to home for you all. So using the risk, cause and effect analysis again, we can see how easy this now becomes to understand. So we have a risk description. This is what I'm concerned about. Insufficient staff development and retention. Then we have causes. These are the potential reasons why this risk could occur. So for example, appraisal and performance management arrangements are not consistent, unable to provide appropriate training and development opportunities. And then we have the effects. So if this risk did materialise, these could be the potential effects: low standards of teaching and learning, and also high staff turnover, shortage of staff. Another key benefit of using the risk, cause and effect analysis is that we can also look at the potential causes and therefore the reasons why a risk could occur to help us identify the key controls that we need to manage the risk. For example, a cause could be appraisal and performance management arrangements are not consistent. Therefore, a key control that we would be looking for would be there is an annual appraisal process in place that ensures all staff receive the right level of support. There are action plans in place for all staff, and these are reviewed at appraisal meetings twice a year. So you'll notice the wordings of the controls are in the past tense. There is a process in place. This means this can be evidenced as there's something is in place rather than introduce a process, as this is more wording as an action to do. We can also use risk, cause and effect analysis, where we can also look at the potential effects or the impact that could occur if the risk materialised, and again look to see what controls do we have in place that could reduce the impact. An effect could be low standards of teaching and education. Therefore, a key control would be we have access to experienced agency staff. Another effect could be high staff turnover, shortage of staff. Therefore, a key control could be staff get to discuss any concerns with HR. So in this slide, you might recognise this typical risk register report that includes key elements such as the risk description, the cause and effects, the inherent gross score, key controls in place, residual net score, further actions to mitigate the risk, progress on actions, and target score. But what's missing from this? How do we know these 7 key controls are working effectively to reduce the risk score from a red 20 down to an amber 12? What if these controls were out of date, never been tested for months, actually not working as effectively as they once did? It could be the case that this risk doesn't actually sit as a true amber, but more realistically back to a red. This is where we start looking at moving one step further into our risk management process to develop what is known as a board assurance framework. To start this off, I'd like you to think about the following questions and ask yourself, how familiar are we in understanding what we mean by the Board Assurance Framework, or the BAF? We may have heard of a BAF, but never fully understood what it does or how it can help us better manage risk. We may have started to develop a BAF, but not got very far in this journey. And we may have developed a BAF, but actually struggled to use it effectively. So the next few slides will hopefully explain what the BAF is, how to develop one, and how to use it effectively. So the word assurance is used a lot in everyday language and can mean different things to different people. It's important that everyone involved in developing, implementing and maintaining the BAF are clear on what is meant by assurance for their own academy and where assurances come from. Assurances should provide confidence based on evidence. In order to frame the debate about assurances, the question the board, audit committee, management should be asking themselves is, do we really know what we think we know? This reflective question should be seriously considered by board, given their responsibility of planning, stewardship, performance and risk management. Remember, what do we want assurance over and how much assurance do we need? On this slide, we look at where we would prioritise our assurance work. This heat map tells us about where the board should focus its risk management and assurance activities. The matrix shows a number of risks plotted based on their inherent before control score, which are the dark blue colours, and their residual after control score, which are the grey colours. Risks 1 and 3. As you can see, these are where the score, based on controls, has moved the most and the likelihood has significantly decreased. So risk number 1 started in the red zone, which is high impact, high likelihood, but has then moved into the yellow zone. Still a high impact, but a significantly lower likelihood. Risk 3 started in the red zone, high impact, high likelihood, but has then moved into the green zone, reduced impact and a reduced likelihood. With these two examples, this is when you need to be confident that the controls are working effectively, otherwise the risk moves immediately back to the high impact, high likelihood threat. Risk 2, as you can see, the score has not changed significantly, with the risk still remaining as a red risk, high impact, high likelihood. We would therefore not necessarily concentrate our resources in testing the effectiveness of these controls, but asking what further actions do we need to introduce and implement to get the risk reduced. Once the actions are completed and added as new controls and the risk is reduced, we can then concentrate on the effectiveness of these controls. So understanding where assurances come from will help us provide a clearer picture of where the Academy receives assurances and whether it's too much, is duplicated, or is none at all, and whether the coverage of assurances is set at the right level to provide confidence to the board. You may also want to consider the independence of any assurance provided in terms of how much reliance or comfort you can take from it. So the assurances that the Academy receives can be broken down to the 3 lines model: first, second and third. First line tends to be the department or the control owner that oversees the process, that can provide any evidence that the control is working effectively. For example, I'm the manager of a department that undertakes a weekly check. I review this with my team and confirm it's working effectively. Second line tends to be any other department or group, committee that receives information or reports where they can challenge the risk or the control owners. So for example, a risk management group, a senior management team, audit committee and the board. So again, moving on from that first line of assurance example into second line, I then prepare a report based on my processes and it's taken to the senior management team or the audit committee, and they are there to check and challenge. And finally, third line of assurance, any external independent support that reviews or provides opinions on the effectiveness of the control environment, for example, internal audit, external audit, regulators, consultancy support. These are the strongest form of assurance, and it's coming from a completely independent viewpoint. On slide 8, we went through how a standard risk register would look, but by now adding in assurances, the board assurance framework begins to take shape. We have a risk description, which is clear and concise of what the risk is to the organisation. Causes, a list of possible reasons why this risk could occur, and the effects, a list of potential effects, consequences that would result if the risk did materialise. We also have a list of key controls in place that will help mitigate the risk, and these can also be linked back to the causes. Assurances, evidence to demonstrate that each control has been reviewed and is working effectively to manage the risk via those first, second and third lines of assurance. And actions, if deemed necessary, any further actions that are required to further mitigate the risk. Remember, you don't have to have actions for the sake of filling in the action column. You should only add an action if you believe the current controls are not sufficient. Once any action has been implemented, it should then be added as a new control and the residual score reviewed to see whether or not it can be reduced. There's no point in adding actions and creating additional work for others, and once they're implemented, they make no difference at all to the risk score. Just a quick note for information, we've seen clients describe actions as continue to work with or ongoing review of. These should really be added as a control, as it's something that's in place and can be evidence and not a new action that you want to implement. The Board Assurance Framework example template. So now, taking the steps on from slide 8, you can now see how we've introduced the 3 lines of assurance and an overall effectiveness rating to develop our Board Assurance Framework report. We can see the full journey of how a risk, now with the descriptions, the cause and effect, the inherent or gross before control score, key controls in place, then the details of the assurances from a first, second and third line perspective, an overall control effective rating, a residual, net and after score, further actions to prove the control environment and progress updates against each action. And if you use target score, it can be added here as well. We can then use this report in so many ways, including seeing where we have controls that have a poor assurance ratings. So do we need to create further actions to improve that control? Making sure we can see that actions are progressing well and on time, or if there seems to be any significant delays or issues. If the overall assurance ratings were poor or limited or scored red, but the risk score was green, we can then challenge the risk owner on whether or not the score is actually correct. We can also see when the risk was last reviewed or updated by the owner. And also we can see if the risk has changed score over a certain period of time. In summary, the easiest advice we can provide is to keep it simple. Using your strategic objectives for the trust, work through these to decide what risks will prevent us from achieving these. At the end of the day, our main aim is to deliver on these objectives, so it's imperative that we know which risks could prevent us from delivering these. Also think about what keeps me awake at night and the risks that we're concerned about. There's no need to dwell on those risks that you are not worried about. These will only distract you from dealing with those key risks. And again, how we've identified what those key risks are. We don't want death by risk register. Too many risks will lose focus. We have seen so many times strategic risk registers cluttered with 20 to 30 plus risks that are then not reviewed, updated due to the time it takes to do this. Also think about, are the risks regularly reviewed at team meetings, senior management teams, audit committees? So make sure, if you can, this becomes a standing agenda item for these key groups. If possible, see if they can sit quite high on the agenda, and at the end of each meeting, once everyone has worked through each agenda item, ask the question to yourselves, has anything that we've been discussed today need to be reflected back onto the strategic risks for any updates or progress notes? And finally, going forward, the main aim is, can the board be assured that the controls are working effectively? So revert back to that statement that we talked about before. What do we want assurances over, and how much assurance do we need? So following on from my introduction slide, I'd just like to bring to your attention that the standard risk register report on slide 8 and the BAF template on slide 14 were both produced from RSM's 4-risk web-based risk management and assurance system that forms one of the modules from our wider governance, risk and compliance suite, Insight for GRC. The 4-risk software both enables and enhances management's ability to monitor and measure overall exposure to risk and examine the effectiveness of each control at all levels through multiple tailored reporting options, as we've shown before. We have over 40 education clients using this software, including many academy clients. So please take a moment to visit our website, www.insightforgrc.com, for further information. If you would like to discuss any part of this presentation, then please do not hesitate to get in contact with me.